Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Tinker O'Toole again with another video. Today we're going to talk about the Stihl USG grinder. Hopefully it's the ultimate guide to using the Stihl USG and understanding it. So you've got three scales. You've got your A scale, which tilts the head, your B scale, which slides the vise, and your C scale, which is for your top plate angle. Now, the Stihl USG grinder is totally different than an Oregon grinder, and we can get all into that. It's also got offset grinding built into that, and we'll get into that as well. So this is just the basic introduction to the grinder, and we'll go over some of the features before we really get into the workings of it and how you can best understand it, and also look at the Stihl USG chart and interpret that and have a much better understanding of it. Because one thing about this grinder, even though you've got a manual that comes with it, it is very, very basic at best, and it doesn't give enough information, especially when you go from an Oregon style grinder to a Stihl USG grinder. I'll just mention one thing in the beginning. The vertical reference point for the top plate cutting angle is at 0, whereas on a Oregon style grinder it is 90 degrees. So that in itself changes the angles. Even though the angles are the same, it changes the degrees as far as representation. What's the point of origin? And the example is when we tilt this head vertical, it's at 0 degrees. So when we tilt it over 30 degrees, that is the equivalent of tilting an Oregon to 60 degrees, because the Oregon uses 90 degrees for vertical reference point. So you're tilting this to the left 30 degrees, and an Oregon you tilt to the right. So it's the opposite. So when we also view a chain from the left tooth and the right tooth, it's the opposite, because on an Oregon we feed in from this side. On the Stihl USG we feed the chain in from this side. So we'll go over all the different features one by one. Okay, so what I want to draw your attention to is the offset that they've got on the adjustable head. The A scale, which is what the motor tilts, that's referred to the A scale, it's set on 0. But if you notice, when looking at the back where the two eye bolts are, they're sitting perfectly horizontal, right? But look at the gap here and look at the gap here. This is much higher. So what that's actually doing is tilting down around 3 degrees. It's offset. And what that's actually doing, that's changing the vertical axis, right? So vertical is no longer 0 degrees, it's tilting over 3 degrees. The whole head is tilting 3 degrees when it's set at 0. It's called offset grinding. And we'll get into that a little bit later, because the C scale has offset grinding on it as well. The whole idea is, while you've got some offset grinding, in the end, all the angles come together to the correct angle. So yeah, I just wanted to draw your attention to that. This is just, the Stihl USG grinder is so different than an Oregon style grinder. So hopefully this guide will point you in the right direction and have a much, much better of understanding technically of the USG grinder. Okay, so what I want to show you now, and I think it's quite easy to see, you can see that it's saying 2.8 degrees offset just by sitting on the motor case. You can actually see the motor here, and if you tilt up and go back, you'll see that the motor is leaning on an angle. So this is what I'm talking about. You've got that 3 degrees offset. Quite easily to see, and then we'll talk about the next offset. Okay, so this is the A scale on the grinder that adjusts the head. First of all, let's just talk about Stihl USG grinder. Stands for Universal Sharpening Grinder. So therefore it's capable of doing 3 things: chainsaw chain, hedge trimmers, and circular saws. So the scale, the A scale's got a fairly large range on it. It goes much more tiltable head than what a Oregon style grinder is. It goes to minus 15 degrees to positive 50. So it's got a fairly large scale on it. Now, as we mentioned before, it's slightly deliberately offset grinding by 3 degrees. We can talk about that there, and if you actually have a look, I've got a mark up the top, and my mark up the top is the true 0. So the manufacturer's mark is the one on the bottom, right? And when we look at the head, it's tilted. So why is it that they've got it like that? They've just got different type of setup on their grinder, offset grinding. And we'll have a really good look at the offset grinding on when we look at the C scale. The next scale we'll look at, and there's nothing special about that, is the B scale. And the B scale goes from minus 40, which is at the back of the grinder. When we come to, we've got 0 where it approximately is at the moment, and then we go up to positive 40 there. So that's the B scale. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the C scale. And if you look at the wheel, I've put a piece of tape on there, and when we pull the grinding wheel into the grinding position, that piece of tape lines up perfectly at 0 degrees, like it got a straight line through the grinding wheel. Lines up right on the drive link, right? So it's right in between the left and the right tooth. Now, before I mentioned it was 17 millimeters offset. And we'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But what I want to draw your attention to is that when we put the adjustments according to the USG chart, you're going to find out that what's going to happen is that we're going to move away from the center line. This is something that offset grinding, a lot of people don't really get into, but can you see the distance now? And we can just move it just to show you. If we go back to the 0 position, which is approximately there, right? And we bring that down, we're right on the point of the tooth, right? So if we adjust the vise for minus 15, which goes back towards the grinder, you can see the distance, how it's moved away. Now, I did say that we had 17 millimeters offset. And what I mean by that is, there's a little black line right there. That's the pivot point. That's where the C scale pivots. But there's the tooth, about 17 millimeters in front of that pivot point. Any movement on the C scale is going to swing that tooth right across the face of the grinding wheel, and it means that you're going to be grinding either on the left side of the wheel or on the right side of the wheel, as opposed to the center line. So we're going to do the tooth that you can see at the moment, viewed from the back, is a left-hand tooth. So we're going to swing the C scale around to 30 degrees. It's sitting on 0 at the moment. And if we move this to 30 degrees, can you see now how the tooth is coming closer to that center line? And if we bring that down, we're only a couple of millimeters away from the tooth, right, on the left-hand side, right? On an Oregon grinder, for full chisel, normally you go this side, but on the Stihl USG grinder, it's just different. Everything's different. So where we're grinding now is slightly, it's not a lot, we're grinding slightly on the right-hand side of the grinding wheel from the center line. That is offset grinding. That's what offset grinding is. And it's a little bit difficult to see, but that grinding wheel, this is Stihl's RS chain, right? That lines up perfectly with the top plate. So when I bring that grinding wheel in, it lines up perfect with the top plate. So it's going to grind the correct angle on that tooth. When you use 10 degrees downward tilt, it achieves exactly the same thing on an Oregon style grinder. And what it does on a grinder is it offsets the grinding wheel from the center line, which is what we're doing here, but we're doing it a little bit different. Remember I said before, when we looked at the motor, we had a different angle tilt on it. It wasn't perfectly dead level. It was 3 degrees out. So with the way they designed the Stihl USG grinder, with the offsets that they've got on the A scale and the offset that they've got on the C scale, you'll find out that the angles are correct. If I bring this grinding wheel in, it lines up perfect with the tooth. And I guess if you're not used to the Stihl USG grinder, everything looks a little bit odd compared to an Oregon. So it's German technology. So you're working with something totally different, and you've got to get your head around that. Because if we look at the A scale and we talk about 0 degrees being vertical, on an Oregon it's 90 degrees being vertical. The vice settings are -15 and +15, irrespective of whether you're using semi-chisel or full chisel. So RS or RM chains, exactly the same settings. So that's the way it's set up, and I can't fault it. It's just the way it is. Their geometry is a little bit different, but the main thing is that you end up with the correct shape of the tooth, irrespective of the settings. As I said, this is a brand new RS chain, and the grinding wheel lines up on that perfect. The only thing that you have to really worry about is dressing the grinding wheel, right? When you dress the wheel. And there is a template for that, right? So it does come with a template. And in actual fact, it's a radius template. Bit of reflection there, but I'll just see if we zoom in, we might be able to see that a lot better. So if we look at 1/4 inch Pico, it's got a radius of 1.7 mil. If we look at 1/4 inch, it's got a radius of 2 mil. 0.325, a radius of 2.4 mil. 3/8 chain, a radius of 2.6 mil. 404's got a radius of 2.8 mil. So the whole idea is, with your dressing block, you're going to only round the inside of the corner. You don't worry about this side, right? You're dressing the stone. If you actually have a good look at that, you'll find out that the curve is on the right-hand side only. The curve is not on the left-hand side. So you're only dressing the inside of the wheel, and you can change the radius of the wheel, which suits the file. That's what it's all about. So what we got here is file size, right? And if you look at that, 3/8 Pico. So what size file do you use on 3/8 Pico? You guessed it, 4mm, radius 2mm. You dress that to 2mm, you put that in there to make sure that fits perfect. So that's a radius card. On the Oregon style grinders, you just get this type of plastic card here. You've only got 2 types of wheels really on an Oregon grinder, which is 3.2mm wide and 4.7mm wide. whereas you can get quite a few different wheels. Even if you look at Stihl's Hexa, it's about 5 millimeters wide, the wheel. But you dress the radius on different wheels to get exactly the right curve. So the next thing to look at, we've gone over looking at the features that are on here. Another nice little feature that I really like is the way we look at the backstop. And we'll just sort of zoom in to look at that. That's another beautiful little feature that I like on the Stihl USG grinder, is when we look at the backstop, can you see how that moves about, or what would that be, about 4 millimeters? On a lot of other grinders, you've got like a bit of a screw, and you can move this backstop. It's called a rawl, R-A-W-L, as I think it's pronounced. And the whole idea is if you don't move it, you end up grinding the edges off when the chain wears down too small. So this is a great little feature. So easy between a left and a right tooth. And even the backstop, yeah, it's made really well. It's, you know, that nice strong spring that's on it and your lock-in nut. So everything on here is like precision. It's really well made, okay? Now, going back early days of the Stihl USG grinder, they had this all made out of metal, but this is made out of nylon. And you've got a nylon washer here, and it's nylon against nylon. So this is going to take forever to wear out. You're not going to wear this out in a hurry. My only advice is don't tighten it up too tight. It only needs to be nipped up. It doesn't need to be really squashing down. If you do adjust it way too tight, it's more effort to open and close it, plus it will wear out much quicker if you really tighten it up. So if you actually have a look how much force it takes, look, I could just do it with a little thumb or finger. Look, it's so easy. That's all you need, a little bit of force on it. Don't over tighten it. The other thing that it's got on here, let's see whether you can see them. They may be a little bit, no, you can just see them. On a lot of grinders, where when you pull the head down, the motor, you've got a bolt that runs, a pin that runs all the way through. What they do on the Stihl USG grinder, they're like little eye sockets. And you've got one here and you've got one over there. And you've got these bolts and these nuts there, one either side, and when you tighten them up, you've got no side play. Have a look at all the reinforcement of the metal. So this whole head mechanism that moves up and down is reinforced structurally, as well as either side has these eye sockets, so that there eliminates all movement of the grinding wheel as you're bringing it up and down. Everything about this Stihl USG grinder is brilliant, and you know, it really hasn't changed for the last 40 years or more. So it is a really nice piece of equipment. Understanding it is probably the hardest part. So look, I've shown you all that. There's only one other thing that I could possibly show you or mention, is that when you take off the side cover, we'll just see if we can come down and see it. It's got this aluminium round nut on it. It's a left-hand thread. So quick release. I like to nip it up with a pair of multi grips. Not much. I put a rag over it and just give it a little bit of extra tight, because sometimes if you tighten it by hand, I've actually had that spin loose. Not often, but it has happened. But what I found out, that if I put a rag over it and open a pair of multi-grips, like these, right, put a rag over it and just give it a little bit, not too much, just a little bit, you'll find it will never come loose. So something to be aware of that can happen if you don't tighten it up properly. So what we will do now, we've gone over quite a lot on those different scales, because this scale here with its offset has to work together with the sliding vise being offset. And as you could see before, with the sliding vise and being offset, that when you move the C scale, it really moves across the face of the wheel. I hope I've explained that properly. It's something that I came across being offset by 17 millimeters. Nobody ever told me about it. It's just that I was doing a lot of work and a lot of research into this grinder and thought, hey, why is this offset? And offset grinding is something not new to people who that operate lathes and CNC machines and that are in the metal industry that does a lot of work with machines. Offset cutting with a lathe or offset grinding is something that's not unusual. So Stihl have decided with the USG grinder to use offset grinding to achieve the desired angles. So the next confusing part that we'll talk about is the Stihl USG chart. And I can tell you from experience, when I first looked at that chart, I was scratching my head. It was very difficult to understand, but once you understand it, it all makes sense. It's almost like if you go out and buy a Stihl USG grinder, it's almost like the Germans thinking that you already understand how to use this grinder, where in actual fact, most people who buy this grinder, especially if they've come from an Oregon, will be confused by the USG chart. So hopefully I can go over the USG chart and point you in the right direction. Okay, so we finally get towards the end nearly, and we're going to talk about looking at the USG chart and how to interpret what's what. So there's 9 columns, starting from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we can go over some of the icons here. This is your A scale at the back, that's the movable head. This is your B scale, the sliding vise. And this is a C scale, which is for the top plate cutting angle and used for circular saws and also used for hedge trimmers. We have other icons over here, 1, 2, and 3. This represents the left tooth, the right tooth, and that's for the rakers, number 3. So we can go over the 9 columns. The 9 columns, the first column lists all the different chains and their pitch, all the way down, 404, RD, and then we get to rapid hexa there. So that's the first column. The second column just shows what I mentioned about the tooth, the left and the right, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So nothing different on every one, all the same. The next column is the A scale, and the A scale, if you read the top line only, all as you're interested in all of this chart is reading the top line. Number 3 is reference in tilting the head to 40 degrees, right? The vise at 0, and your positive and negative on your C scale set at 0, because, and if you have a look at the wheel here, this is how we do the rakers, set at 40 degrees. So this is all for the rakers, all the way down. So really disregard that. You're only interested in number 1 and number 2. So here we start with the pitch, 6.35 in metric, and it's 1/4 inch pitch, and it goes on 3/8 low profile, 3/8 pico, 0.325, 3/8 standard, 404, and a few different other type of chains, right? So all as you've got to do is look at your first top line and set 40 degrees, the vise minus 15 for the left, positive 15 for the right, and there's your 30. We go over here, they're telling you there's the number for the wheel for that chain, and they're saying keep a 1.7 millimeter radius on there, all right? And they're telling you here, this is the raker gauge depth, 0.45 of a millimeter. This is a side plate angle. So if you go down to something a little bit more common, which would be standard 3/8, 9.32. So there's the pitch, 3/8. Number 1 and 2 we're interested in, 40 degrees for the left, 40 degrees for the right. That's number 1, number 2, so it's left and right. minus 15, positive 15, 30 degrees on the top plate. That's the grinding wheel. There's the radius, 2.6 millimeters. And in this column here, we've gone up to 0.65 of a millimeter on the raker. Now, on this side, you'll see reference. You've got PS, PM, RS, RM, so rapid super. The side plate should be 60 degrees. Rapid micro, semi-chisel. So you've got full chisel here, semi-chisel here, 75 degrees. So 60 degrees, 75. And you'll see this as you go through some of the chains. Not all the chains is listed as rapid super, but these are rapid super and rapid micro for these different sizes, which is 0.325, 38, and 404. There's actually, see, there's 3 of them are listed there. So when you get down to rapid hexa, which is 3/8 chain, 25 degrees, 25 degrees, 0 on the vise, 25 degrees on the top plate, and you should have a side plate of 60 degrees. I just got some additional information down here where it says second row, and that's number 3, maintenance, raker height, wheel, right? So that's the number of the wheel to use there for standard 3/8, which I use. Number 1 is left hand, number 2 is right hand. Number 1, minus 15 on the vise. Number 2, positive 15 on the vise. And I've got it written down there, minus 15 for left cutters, positive 15 for right cutters. This is something that they should have included because the chart itself really doesn't go into any detail. So I hope I've explained it in that brief 5 minutes that I've just been on there, the 9 columns. So you're really interested, the columns that you're really interested are A, B, and C, and we read the top line only, right? It's only if you ever do the rakers. I do the rakers with a progressive depth gauge. I never use a wheel. If you do the rakers on number 3, right, you've got to set it to 40 degrees angle, 0 degrees on the vise, 0 degrees on the C scale. And yeah, adjust your rakers doing it that way. I don't know anyone that would do it that way. To me, that would be very time consuming. It's not something that I would do. But anyway, it is there for you. Now, the only one other thing that I didn't mention earlier in the video is that I didn't do a demonstration of sharpening the chain because that's going to drag it out even a lot longer. What I wanted to do was point out all the different features of the grinder and the offset angles and everything else like that there. Only one thing I'll say about sharpening is that when you put your chain in the guide and you adjust your backstop and you bring your wheel down, that you just have it so that the wheel touches the tooth. You can always adjust a little bit more, and you should always take only as minimal amount of material off the wheel so it doesn't overheat. And generally speaking, you'll take between 0.1 and 0.2 of a millimeter off the tooth every time you sharpen it if the chain is in good nick. If the chain is damaged, then you're going to have to take a lot more. So that's the only piece of advice I got on sharpening. And the only other piece of advice that I would give on sharpening is that when people bring the grinding wheel down, some people are a little bit aggressive and they bring the grinding wheel down very fast. This is the worst mistake that you can make. You only bring the grinding wheel down and you have a tap-in motion. And by tap-in motion, I mean you bring the grinding wheel down and you just off, on, until it finally grinds its way right through, and it'll be nice and cool. You'll be able to place your finger on it and it won't overheat. If you go up to if you use an angle grinder or a bench grinder and you get a piece of metal and you push it in too hard, it'll overheat. So any type of grinding media will cause friction and heat if you do it too fast. It's nice and slow and you get a much better finish. And these wheels from Stihl are really made out of some brilliant material, much better than the pink oxide wheels that you see on Oregon and Taconic. These are really high quality wheels and they really do work well and they wear well also. So I hope that information helps, and I hope that I explained the US chart. When I first got the USG chart, I was really confused about this 40 degrees in the second line. What that in that one box. That's what really threw me more than anything else. I couldn't figure out while we had 340s, 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 340s. The only thing that you'll notice, just about every Rapid Super and Rapid Micro, they're all 40 degrees. Still use 40 degrees only, which is 50 degrees on an Oregon grinder. All right. And then the 40 degrees is for the rakers. So you shouldn't get confused. Just about every single chain, you can't go wrong. It's 40 degrees. And in the B scale, every chain, Rapid Super, Rapid Micro, is all plus or minus 15 degrees. And in the C scale, every chain use plus 30 and minus 30 for the top plate, right? And the only time it starts to change, where you see these double lines there for Rapid PD3, that's Pico, or not, Duro chains, that's tungsten carbide, rescue chains, and that's Rapid Hexa there. And Rapid Hexa is totally different. 25 degrees, right? So 25 degrees on a USG grinder is 65 degrees on an Oregon, right? And 0 degrees on the vise, and 25 degrees on the top plate angle. And see what they turn around and say here. So they're saying here, you don't see the radius because Hexa doesn't have a radius, right? It's a span at 120 degrees. The wheel's dressed like a V shape. So when the grinding wheel comes in on the Hexa, you use the side of the wheel, then the next angle is 60 degrees and the next angle is 60 degrees. So that's why you've got a blank there, and you'll see over there that the side plate should be 60 degrees. So yeah, look, I hope that information helps. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Please subscribe to the channel, and any comments are certainly welcome.